And what about the more general issues of structuring? Okay, you've got your woofie, say, about then figuring out partnership type models. The sort of what some people sometimes call the LinkedIn partnership model, or various other partnership models. Is there any amongst your companies? Is it just solve it individually, or do certain forms tend to dominate?
Sure. So traditionally, you had kind of international companies who
I think we've lost our feed. Hello. Okay. Going back then, we were talking about the issues of different generalized models, and which patterns do you see coming up most often?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
basic setup for coming into China is you have an offshore company, either in your home country or maybe in Hong Kong or Singapore, because it's a tax advantage. And Hong Kong companies have some benefits when they're connected with a Chinese WFOE. So WFOE stands for wholly owned foreign entity, and then the operations are done through the WFOE. Now, if you have a foreign entity and a WFOE, the fundraising must happen offshore in US dollars. So Chinese investors cannot generally invest offshore unless they have a US dollars or US dollar fund. If the Chinese fund, now it's a little complicated, if the Chinese fund is not government backed and they're angel or early stage, they might be willing to hold stock in the offshore company, but invest in renminbi. The other side is if you're onshore, you would have the offshore structure, and then you'd have a separate onshore company. We call it a local company or a local company that's owned by a local Chinese citizen, and they own that company completely. Your offshore structure does not own it, and you try and tie it together with a contract called a VIE. So contractually, the companies are tied together, but they're not tied together with an ownership structure. And then that local entity owned by a foreign national can do business, can do some businesses that are restricted. Although that loophole is kind of shrinking and it's increasingly difficult. The second structure is a JV. A lot of companies do JVs, but these are usually only in restricted industries. Now, the issue with a JV is if you have a JV in China, it might become difficult, especially if you're in internet software, to exit later because you have to do two negotiations when you exit. You have to negotiate the price for the international company, then you have to negotiate the price for the onshore JV. And so it's best to make sure that you have some legal language around the JV to make sure that your JV partner does not hold up your exit when you're selling the parent company. And then finally, you've got, I think you could call it the Evernote structure. So first is the LinkedIn structure, where the offshore owns a majority of the onshore, but then some local VCs come in. And with a LinkedIn structure, it's an independent management team with a board of directors where you've got the local management, the international management, and one or two or three local VCs all trying to run basically an independent China company that is it's independently run and managed, which makes it more nimble, but it's still majority controlled by the parent company. And that's how LinkedIn started in China. And then there's the newest one, which is the Evernote, or some of the other companies are looking at it. And this is where the China company, also ARM Semiconductors is using this model, where the China version of the company is completely 100% independent of the parent company. It's a completely separate company and the parent does not have a majority ownership. The parent, the original parent, might not have any ownership of the China company. and that's run independently and potentially could be seen as a local company, especially if it's owned by sort of a local Chinese investor. So you've got a selection. There is no real right way to do it. Depends on where you're coming from, and you can easily spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal trying to get somebody to tell you which way the right way is, and you'll still end up no better than if you come in and say work with us or get some advice. Basically, there's no future proofing. Okay, so depending on the stage of your company, you might have one structure. When you grow, another structure is more appropriate. And then yet again, a third structure you might have to take a third on structure, depending on who you take money from and what businesses you end up going into. So I think the most important thing is to be flexible, to understand that there almost isn't a right way of doing things. And to understand that you will never be able to get a legal opinion saying that you're okay, and that if you want to operate here, you need to educate your board and educate the stakeholders and your shareholders that there's a gray area. And so and if you're not comfortable with operating in a gray area, or some not black and white, then you probably don't belong here and you should stay at home.